The snow was falling harder than Marcus had seen in 15 years living in these Montana mountains. He'd chosen this remote cabin specifically to escape people, to find peace in the wilderness after his divorce left him questioning everything about human nature. But at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in February, 3 sharp knocks shattered that peace forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus set down his coffee and listened. The wind was howling through the pines, but those knocks were deliberate, humans. He grabbed his flashlight and peered through the frosted window. A figure stood on his porch, barely visible through the swirling snow. When he opened the door, his flashlight beam revealed a young woman, maybe 25, with 4 small children clinging to her legs and arms. She was shivering violently, her lips blue, her thin jacket completely inadequate for the storm raging around them. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I know this sounds crazy, but you ain't the daddy, but you're all we got." Marcus stood frozen in his doorway, trying to process what he was seeing. The woman before him looked like she'd been through hell. Her blonde hair was matted with snow and ice, her jeans were torn at the knees, and her sneakers were completely soaked through. But it was the children that made his heart stop, 4 of them. The oldest couldn't have been more than 6, a little girl with dark curls who was trying to shield the smaller ones from the wind. Twin boys who looked about 4 were pressed against the woman's legs, their matching dinosaur pajamas offering no protection from the cold. And in her arms, wrapped in what looked like a car blanket, was a baby who couldn't have been more than 8 months old. "Ma'am, I think you've got the wrong," Marcus started, but the woman cut him off. "Marcus Holloway, right? You used to work construction in Billings before you moved up here? Your ex-wife was Sarah, and you had that falling out with your brother Jake about 5 years back?" Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The stranger knew details about his life that he'd never shared with anyone in these mountains. "There's no time to explain everything right now," she interrupted, stepping closer. "These babies are freezing, and if we don't get them warm soon, the little ones won't make it through the night. Please, I'm begging you. Let us in, and I'll tell you everything." The baby in her arms let out a weak cry, and Marcus noticed the child's lips were turning blue. His instincts as a human being overrode his confusion and caution. He stepped aside and gestured them in. "Get them by the fire," he said, already moving toward his linen closet. "I'll grab some blankets." The woman herded the children toward his stone fireplace, which still had glowing embers from the fire he'd been maintaining all evening. The little girl with the dark curls immediately sat down and pulled the twin boys close to her, while the woman bounced the baby gently, trying to get some warmth back into the infant's tiny body. Marcus returned with every blanket and towel he owned, plus some of his own warm clothes that might fit the older children. "Here," he said, wrapping a thick wool blanket around the woman's shoulders. "Get those wet clothes off the kids. I'll make some hot chocolate." As he worked in his kitchen, heating milk and hunting for the box of cocoa mix he kept for the rare occasions his nephew visited, Marcus stole glances at his unexpected guests. The woman was efficiently stripping the wet clothes off the children and wrapping them in his blankets. She moved with the practiced ease of someone who'd been caring for these kids for a long time. "What's your name?" he called from the kitchen. "Emma," she replied, not looking up from the baby she was examining. "Emma Rodriguez. And before you ask, yes, I know this is completely insane. A stranger showing up at your door in the middle of a blizzard with 4 kids, claiming you're somehow connected to us. But Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully." Marcus brought over 4 mugs of hot chocolate, keeping them at a safe temperature for small hands. The little girl with the curls accepted hers with a shy thank you, while the twin boys grabbed theirs eagerly. The baby was too young for chocolate, but Emma accepted a mug gratefully. Okay, Marcus said, settling into his armchair across from them, unlistening. Emma took a sip of the hot chocolate and closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When she opened them, Marcus could see they were filled with a mixture of desperation and determination. 6 months ago, I was working as a waitress in Denver, she began. Single mom to Lily here. She nodded toward the little girl with the curls, trying to make ends meet. Then I got a call from Child Protective Services. They had found twin boys, Alex and Ben, abandoned in a motel room. Their mother had overdosed, and they had no other family. The boys were going into the system. She paused to check on the baby, who was finally starting to show some color in his cheeks. I'd grown up in foster care myself. I knew what it was like. So I applied to be their foster mother, even though I could barely afford to take care of Lily and myself. Marcus found himself leaning forward, despite his confusion about why she was telling him this. And the baby? That's Tommy, Emma said, her voice softening as she looked down at the infant. 3 weeks ago, I got another call. A teenage mother had given birth and couldn't keep him. She specifically requested that if possible, he be placed with the twins. Apparently, she'd heard about me through the social worker. Marcus shook his head. Emma, I still don't understand what any of this has to do with me. I don't have kids. I've never worked with child services. I don't even know anyone in Denver. Emma set down her mug and looked directly at him. Marcus, what if I told you that all 4 of these children have one thing in common? Something that connects them not just to each other, but to you? The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and Marcus realized that even if he wanted to send them back out into the storm, it would be impossible. The roads down the mountain would be completely impassable by now. I'd say you're talking in riddles, Marcus replied. And I'd like to know how you know so much about my personal life. Emma reached into the diaper bag she'd been carrying and pulled out a manila folder. It was thick with papers, some of them official-looking documents with government seals. Marcus, have you ever heard of the Colorado Genetic Research Institute? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. No, should I? Have. 15 years ago, you donated sperm to help pay for college. You were 22, broke, and they offered good money for what seemed like an easy way to make ends meet. You donated regularly for about 8 months before you moved to Montana. The hot chocolate mug slipped from Marcus's hands, shattering on the stone hearth. Lily jumped at the sound, but Emma continued talking. The institute had a data breach. 6 months ago. Donor records, recipient information, everything. Most of it was encrypted, but some files were compromised, including yours. Marcus stood up abruptly, his mind reeling. You're saying these kids are your biological children, Emma finished. All 4 of them. Different mothers, all of whom used your donations through the Institute's program. The room seemed to spin around Marcus. He walked to his window and stared out at the swirling snow, trying to process what he'd just heard. Behind him, he could hear Emma comforting one of the twins who had started to cry. This is impossible, he said finally. Even if what you're saying is true, how did you find me? How did you know where I lived? Emma's voice was quiet when she answered. Because after the data breach, some of us started talking. The mothers who had used the institute, the families who had been affected. We created a support group, trying to figure out what to do with this information. Some people wanted to sue. Others wanted to pretend it never happened. She paused and Marcus turned back to face her. But then things started happening. Lily's mom, my ex-roommate, who I'd helped raise Lily since she was born, died in a car accident 8 months ago. The twins' mother died from an overdose. Tommy's teenage mom gave birth and realized she couldn't handle being a parent. Marcus felt his legs give out, and he sank back into his chair. And you think this is all connected somehow? I think these children lost their mothers and ended up in my care for a reason, Emma said firmly. "And when I was researching you, trying to figure out if you were the kind of person who might help, I learned something else. Your brother Jake didn't just have a falling out with you 5 years ago. He died in Afghanistan 3 months after you two stopped talking." Marcus's head snapped up. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because Jake had been in contact with the Colorado Genetic Research Institute too. He'd been trying to track down information about potential half-siblings for his own daughter. When he died, his widow gave me his research files." Emma reached into her folder again and pulled out a photograph. It showed Jake in his army uniform, standing next to a little girl who looked remarkably similar to Lily. "Marcus, Jake's daughter." "Emma, yes. I was named after her. She's been living with relatives in California since Jake died. But those relatives are getting older, and they're not sure they can continue caring for her long term." Marcus stared at the photograph, seeing his brother's face for the first time in years. The resemblance between Jake's daughter and the little girl sitting by his fireplace was unmistakable. "Jake left a letter," Emma continued, "for you. His widow wasn't sure if she should send it, given your history. But when I explained what was happening, she gave it to me to bring to you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She handed Marcus a sealed envelope with his name written in Jake's familiar handwriting. Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. "Marcus," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I'm probably gone, and someone has figured out what I spent my last months researching. I know we left things badly between us, and I know you blame me for Sarah leaving. Maybe you're right too. But I found something that changes everything, and I need you to know about it before it's too late." Marcus looked up at Emma, who was watching him carefully. He knew about this. "Keep reading," she said softly. "The genetic research thing, it's bigger than just the donations. They were doing experiments, Marcus. Trying to track genetic markers, studying the children who were born from the program. Some of those kids have ended up in dangerous situations, and I think it's not a coincidence." Marcus's blood ran cold as he continued reading. "I've been trying to track down all the children who share our genetic markers. Yes, I used the same program you did. Before I met Linda, someone has been watching these families, Marcus. The mothers who die in accidents, the kids who end up in foster care. It's all connected to the research program. You need to protect them. You're the only one left who can." The letter ended with coordinates and an address in Canada, along with Jake's signature and a postscript. "Emma Rodriguez is the only person I found who I trust with this information. If she comes to you, listen to her. Our mistakes don't have to define these children's futures." Marcus set the letter down with shaking hands. The 4 children were now all asleep by the fire, the baby curled up in Lily's protective arms, while the twins leaned against each other. They looked so innocent, so vulnerable. "Emma," he said quietly, "what exactly are you asking me to do?" Emma's expression was grave as she met his eyes. "I'm asking you to help me keep them safe. All of them, including Jake's daughter in California. Because Marcus, I don't think we just stumbled into this situation by chance. And I don't think the people who were running those experiments are done with us yet." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, Marcus realized his quiet life in the mountains had just ended forever. Marcus spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing of 5 strangers who had somehow become his responsibility. Emma had taken the couch, with baby Tummy sleeping in a makeshift crib Marcus had fashioned from a laundry basket and pillows. The twins were curled up on an air mattress beside the dying fire, while Lily had claimed the old recliner, wrapped in blankets like a small fortress. When dawn finally broke, the storm had passed, leaving behind 3 feet of fresh snow and a crystalline silence that felt almost ominous. Marcus made coffee and surveyed his transformed cabin. Children's clothes hung from every available surface, drying by the fire. the smell of baby formula mixed with wood smoke. His solitary sanctuary had become something entirely different overnight. Emma was already awake, quietly feeding Tommy while watching the sunrise through the frost-covered windows. She looked older in the morning light, worn down by whatever journey had brought her to his door. "We need to talk about what happens next," Marcus said, handing her a mug of coffee. Emma accepted it gratefully. "The roads will be clear by this afternoon. We could leave if that's what you want." "And where?" Marcus asked. "You said people were watching these families. You think it's safe to just drive back to Denver?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly? No. I've been running for 3 weeks, ever since I got Tommy. Strange cars started showing up outside my apartment. My phone started getting calls from numbers that would disconnect when I answered. And then my landlord got a visit from men claiming to be from child services, asking questions about my foster placements." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What kind of questions? Medical histories, behavioral patterns, whether the children showed any unusual developmental traits. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "They weren't from any agency I'd ever worked with." Lily stirred in the recliner, and both adults fell silent until she settled back into sleep. Marcus found himself studying the little girl's face, looking for traces of himself in her features. The thought that she might be his biological daughter felt surreal, but there was something about her serious expression that reminded him of childhood photos of himself. "Emma, this genetic research institute Jake mentioned in his letter. What exactly were they studying?" Emma reached for the manila folder she'd shown him the night before. "From what I could piece together from Jake's research and my own digging, they weren't just facilitating sperm donations. They were tracking the children born from those donations, collecting data on their development, their health, and their families." She pulled out a thick stack of medical records and research papers. "Look at this. Every one of the children in my care has been flagged in their medical files for something called enhanced cognitive monitoring. Their pediatricians have been submitting quarterly reports to a company called Meridian Biosciences." Marcus examined the papers, his construction worker's practical mind trying to make sense of the scientific jargon. "What's enhanced cognitive monitoring?" "IQ testing, memory assessments, pattern recognition evaluations. But here's the strange part: all 4 children have scored in the 99th percentile on every test they've been given. And according to Jake's research, that's true for every child born from your genetic material." Marcus set down his coffee, suddenly understanding why someone might be interested in these children. "You're saying they're all gifted?" "I'm saying they're all showing signs of intellectual abilities that are statistically impossible to occur by chance." Emma's voice was tight with worry. "And now their mothers are dead, and someone is very interested in where these children end up." The twins began to stir, and soon the cabin was filled with the chaos of morning routines. Marcus found himself helping dress small bodies, wiping faces, and distributing bowls of cereal with an efficiency that surprised him. He'd never considered himself particularly good with children, but something about these 4 felt natural. As the morning progressed, Marcus noticed things that made Emma's claims more believable. Lily had taught herself to read by studying the labels on his canned goods, sounding out complex words with perfect pronunciation. The twins, Alex and Ben, were building elaborate structures with his firewood, creating architectural marvels that defied their age. Even baby Tommy seemed unusually alert, tracking conversations with an intensity that felt almost adult. Around noon, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and immediately went pale. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "My contact at Child Services. She says men came to her office this morning asking about my foster placements. They had official-looking paperwork, but when she tried to verify their credentials, the phone numbers they gave were disconnected." Marcus felt the walls of his safe little world closing in. "How long do we have?" "I don't know. Maybe hours, maybe days." "But Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Marcus braced himself. Go ahead. Are you willing to fight for these children? Because if we're going to keep them safe, it's going to mean giving up everything normal about your life. It's going to mean running, hiding, probably breaking laws, and there's no guarantee we'll succeed. Marcus looked around his cabin, at the life he'd built in isolation, at the peace he'd cultivated after his world fell apart. Then he looked at Lily, who was quietly reading one of his old National Geographic magazines to the twins, and at Baby Tommy, who was reaching for the sunlight streaming through the window. What's the alternative? He asked. We turn them over to the system and hope for the best. But Marcus, I've seen what happens to special children in the system. They disappear into programs, into research facilities, into places where their gifts are exploited rather than nurtured. Marcus made his decision. What do we need to do? Emma smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. First, we need to get Jake's daughter from California. According to his research, she's in the most danger because her relatives have already been contacted by Meridian Biosciences. They think she's being transferred to a special school for gifted children, but Jake's notes suggest it's actually a research facility. Marcus felt his protective instincts kicking in. How do we get her? Jake left those coordinates in his letter. There's a safe house in Canada where some other families affected by this situation have been gathering. But first, we need to collect Emma, Jake's daughter, and we need to do it without alerting whoever's been watching her. Marcus was already mentally cataloging what they would need. My truck can handle mountain roads, but it won't fit 7 people comfortably. We'll probably need supplies, cash, and fake identification. I've been preparing for this possibility, Emma said, reaching into another section of her folder. I have emergency funds, and Jake left instructions for obtaining clean documents. But Marcus, once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be wanted for kidnapping, probably worse. Marcus thought about his ex-wife Sarah, about the life he'd tried to build and lost, about the years he'd spent hiding from human connection. Then he thought about his brother Jake, who had died trying to protect children he'd never even met. These kids didn't ask for any of this, he said finally. And if what you're saying is true, they're in danger because of choices I made 15 years ago. I can't live with that. Emma nodded, already moving into planning mode. Jake's daughter is staying with his widow's parents in Sacramento. The fake school pickup is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. If we leave now, we can intercept her before then. Marcus began packing with military efficiency, gathering survival gear, warm clothes, and non-perishable food. As he worked, he found himself thinking about the irony of the situation. He'd donated sperm in college because he was broke and desperate, never imagining the long-term consequences. Now those consequences had arrived at his door in the form of 4 children who needed protection from the very system that had created them. Marcus, Lily said quietly, appearing at his side as he loaded his truck. Are we going on an adventure? Marcus crouched down to her level, struck by the intelligence in her dark eyes. Yes, sweetheart. A big adventure. Are you scared? Lily considered this seriously. A little, but Emma says you're going to help keep us safe. And I think you're probably very good at keeping people safe. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a protective instinct fiercer than anything he'd ever experienced. I'm going to do my best, Lily. I promise. As they loaded the children into his truck, Marcus took one last look at his cabin. The place had been his refuge, his sanctuary from a world that had disappointed him. But as he watched Emma settle the baby into an improvised car seat while the twins chattered excitedly about their journey, Marcus realized that running toward something might be better than running away from it. The drive down the mountain was treacherous, but Marcus's truck handled the snow-covered roads with confidence. As they descended toward the highway, Emma used an encrypted phone app to contact Jake's widow, warning her about the fake school pickup and arranging a meeting point. "Linda's scared," Emma reported after ending the call. "She says men have been watching the house for days. She's been keeping Emma inside, telling the neighbors the girl has the flu." Marcus pressed harder on the accelerator. "How long is it?" "In Sacramento? 14 hours if we drive straight through." "But Marcus, we need to assume they're tracking us somehow. Credit cards, cell phones, even license plate readers." Marcus had anticipated this. "I've got cash, and I know back roads that avoid the main highways. We'll make it." As they merged onto the interstate, Marcus caught sight of Lily in the rearview mirror. She was reading to the twins from a book about dinosaurs, her voice clear and confident as she explained concepts that seemed far beyond her years. In the passenger seat, Emma was quietly singing to baby Tommy, who gazed up at her with remarkable focus. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was part of something larger than himself. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unknown. But as the miles rolled by and the children settled into the rhythm of travel, Marcus began to understand that his life had been leading to this moment all along. The real adventure was just beginning. They drove through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only for gas and supplies at small towns where Marcus paid cash and avoided security cameras. Emma had brought changes of clothes and basic supplies, but traveling with 4 children required constant attention to needs, both practical and emotional. As night fell and they crossed into Nevada, Marcus realized they were committed now. There was no turning back, no returning to his quiet mountain refuge. Whatever lay ahead in Sacramento, and beyond that in Canada, would determine not just his future, but the futures of 4 extraordinary children who had become his responsibility. The darkness of the highway, with the steady breathing of sleeping children filling the truck, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: purpose. These children needed him, and perhaps more importantly, he needed them. The donation he'd made as a broke college student had created something precious and vulnerable, and now it was his job to protect it. The road stretched ahead, uncertain and dangerous, but no longer lonely. The warehouse district of Sacramento, at 3 in the morning, was a maze of shadows and empty loading docks. Marcus killed the headlights as he navigated his truck through the industrial complex, following Emma's whispered directions from Jake's coded notes. The children were all asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the 14-hour drive, but Marcus's nerves were wire-tight with anticipation. There, Emma pointed to a seemingly abandoned building with a faded sign reading, "Pacific Storage Solutions." Linda said she'd park behind the 3rd bay door. Marcus spotted the silver Honda Civic immediately. It was the only car in the lot, and through the windshield, he could make out 2 figures in the front seats. As they approached, a woman stepped out of the driver's side, clutching the hand of a young girl who looked to be about 8 years old. Linda Holloway was nothing like Marcus had imagined his brother's widow would be. She was tall and athletic, with prematurely gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her face bore the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of constant worry. The little girl beside her was unmistakably Jake's daughter. She had the same stubborn chin and intelligent eyes that Marcus remembered from his brother's childhood. "Marcus?" Linda's voice was barely above a whisper as he approached. "God, you look just like him." The reunion was awkward and emotional. Marcus hadn't spoken to Linda since Jake's funeral, and the weight of their shared grief hung between them like a barrier. But the urgency of their situation didn't allow for extended pleasantries. "This is Emma," Linda said, gently pushing the little girl forward. "Emma, this is your Uncle Marcus. He's going to help keep you safe." The child studied Marcus with an intensity that was unnerving. "You're the one Daddy was trying to find," she said matter-of-factly. "He showed me pictures. He said you were probably the smartest person he knew, even if you were too stubborn to admit it." Marcus felt his throat constrict. Even from beyond the grave, Jake was still trying to heal the rift between them. Your dad was pretty smart himself, kiddo. Linda pulled Marcus aside while Emma Rodriguez helped transfer Jake's daughter's belongings to his truck. Marcus, I need you to understand what you're taking on. Emma isn't just gifted, she's off the charts. She taught herself calculus at age 7. She's been having dreams about places she's never been, people she's never met. And lately, she's been having nightmares about men in white coats coming to take her away. Marcus glanced back at the little girl, who was now introducing herself to the other children with remarkable poise for someone who'd just been uprooted from everything familiar. How much does she know about what's happening? Everything, Linda said grimly. She read Jake's research files when she was 6. She understands exactly why we're running, and she's terrified. But Marcus, she's also been preparing. She's memorized escape routes, she knows how to hotwire a car, and she's been teaching herself basic survival skills from library books. The revelation that an 8-year-old had been preparing for this kind of life sent chills down Marcus's spine. Jesus! Linda, what kind of world are we living in? One where children with extraordinary minds are treated like laboratory specimens, Linda replied bitterly. The men who came to my house weren't subtle, Marcus. They offered to pay for Emma's education at an exclusive boarding school. When I said no, they implied that my ability to provide adequate care for a special needs child might need to be evaluated by social services. Marcus felt anger building in his chest. They threatened you. They threatened Emma. They made it very clear that one way or another, she was going to end up in their program. Linda's voice cracked slightly. Jake died trying to prevent this. I won't let his sacrifice be meaningless. As they finished transferring supplies between vehicles, Marcus noticed that Jake's daughter had seamlessly integrated herself into the group dynamics of the other children. She was quietly explaining something to Lily while simultaneously helping the twins organize their stuffed animals. Even baby Tommy seemed calmer in her presence. She has a way with other children, Marcus observed. Linda nodded. Jake used to say she was like a little mother hen, always looking out for everyone else. I think it's part of whatever makes these kids special. They're not just intellectually advanced. They're emotionally intuitive in ways that feel almost supernatural. Emma Rodriguez approached them, carrying the sleeping Tommy. We need to move. I've been monitoring emergency services radio frequencies, and there's been unusual activity in this area for the past hour. Multiple agencies conducting training exercises that don't match any scheduled operations. Marcus made the decision quickly. Linda, you should disappear for a while. Take a vacation, visit relatives, whatever keeps you off their radar. If they can't find Emma through you, it buys us time. Linda hugged Jake's daughter goodbye, whispering something in her ear that made the little girl nod seriously. Then she pressed a small device into Marcus's hand. It's a satellite phone Jake had made, encrypted, untraceable. If you need anything, if there's any way I can help, we'll be okay, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. As they loaded everyone into his truck, Marcus realized they now had 5 children to protect instead of 4, and their situation had become exponentially more complicated. The truck was crowded, supplies were running low, and they still had hundreds of miles to go before reaching the coordinates Jake had left them. But as they pulled out of the warehouse district and headed north toward the Canadian border, Marcus caught sight of something in his rearview mirror that made his blood freeze. 3 black SUVs had materialized from side streets, following at a distance that was clearly meant to be unnoticed. Emma, he said quietly, not wanting to alarm the children. We've got company. Emma Rodriguez glanced back and immediately began moving with practiced efficiency. Kids, we're going to play a game, she announced cheerfully. Everyone needs to put on their seatbelts and lie down low. We're going to see who can stay the quietest the longest. The children responded immediately, clearly understanding that this wasn't really a game. Jake's daughter helped settle the younger ones, while keeping her own movements calm and controlled. Marcus was struck by how well prepared they all seemed for this kind of emergency. How many? Emma asked once the children were secured. 3 vehicles, probably 12 people minimum. Marcus was already calculating alternate routes in his head. They're hanging back, which means they either want to see where we're going, or they're waiting for backup. The satellite phone Linda gave. You can reuse it to warn the people at the safe house. Marcus glanced at the device Linda had pressed into his hand. Not while we're being followed. Any transmission could be intercepted. The chase that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced outside of movies. The black SUVs maintained their distance as he navigated through Sacramento's early morning traffic, but their presence was constant and menacing. Marcus used every trick he'd learned from years of driving mountain roads, taking sudden turns, doubling back through residential neighborhoods, and using the complex freeway system to try to lose their pursuers. But whoever was following them was professional and persistent. Every time Marcus thought he'd gained some distance, the SUVs would reappear, coordinating their movements with military precision. "Uncle Marcus," Jake's daughter said quietly from the back seat. "I've been watching them. They're not trying to catch us." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean, sweetheart? They're hurting us. Every time you turn to go one direction, they position themselves to make you choose a different route. They're making us go exactly where they want us to go." Marcus realized the 8-year-old was right. The pursuit pattern wasn't random. It was designed to force them onto specific roads, toward a predetermined destination. "Emma, where are we being led?" Emma Rodriguez was studying a map on her phone, tracking their route. "North, toward the mountains. There's a research facility about 50 miles from here. Meridian Biosciences has a compound near Lake Tahoe." The trap was becoming clear. They weren't being chased, they were being delivered. Marcus made a split-second decision that went against every instinct for self-preservation he possessed. Instead of continuing north, he took a sharp right turn onto a side road that led back toward Sacramento. The SUVs, caught off guard by the sudden change in direction, had to scramble to reposition themselves. For a few crucial minutes, Marcus gained the advantage. "Hold on, everyone," he announced, pressing the accelerator to the floor. What followed was a high-speed chase through suburban Sacramento that tested every limit of Marcus's driving skills and his truck's capabilities. He wove through strip malls and residential developments, using his knowledge of construction sites and back roads to stay ahead of their pursuers. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jake's daughter had been quietly working with something in her lap, and suddenly she held up a small electronic device. "I built this from parts in your toolbox," she announced calmly. "It's a signal jammer. If I activate it, it should disrupt their communications for about 10 minutes. Marcus stared at her in amazement. "You built a signal jammer? You're 8 years old." "Daddy taught me electronics before he deployed. He said it might come in handy someday." She looked at Marcus with Jake's stubborn expression. "Should I turn it on?" "Do it." The effect was immediate. The coordinated movements of the SUVs became confused and erratic as their ability to communicate with each other was severed. Marcus used the window of opportunity to make a series of rapid direction changes that finally allowed them to disappear into the maze of Sacramento's industrial district. When they finally stopped at an abandoned gas station 20 miles outside the city, everyone was shaking from adrenaline. The children had remained remarkably calm throughout the chase, but Marcus could see the toll it had taken on their young faces. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, doing a quick head count. "We're okay, Uncle Marcus," Jake's daughter said, already dismantling her homemade signal jammer. "But they'll be looking for us even harder now. We need to get to the safe house as fast as possible." Emma Rodriguez was checking the encrypted phone for messages from their contacts in Canada. "There's been a development," she reported. "The safe house has been compromised." Our people had to evacuate 12 hours ago. Marcus felt the walls closing in around them. They were fugitives now, with nowhere to run and a truck full of children who were being hunted by people with unlimited resources and official backing. "So what do we do now?" he asked. Jake's daughter looked up from her electronics work with an expression that was far too adult for her 8-year-old face. "We disappear," she said simply. "Daddy left instructions for this scenario too. There are people who help families like us, but we have to find them on our own." Marcus realized that their real journey was just beginning. The chase through Sacramento had been just the opening move in a much larger and more dangerous game. But as he looked at the 5 extraordinary children in his care, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: determination to protect something more important than his own safety. They were no longer just running from their pursuers. They were running toward a future where these remarkable children could be safe to develop their gifts without fear of exploitation. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, but Marcus was no longer facing it alone. The abandoned mining town of Silver Creek, Nevada, hadn't seen permanent residents in over 30 years. Rusted machinery dotted the landscape like metal skeletons, and most of the buildings were nothing more than weathered frames and broken windows. But for Marcus and his unlikely family, it represented something precious: invisibility. They'd been hiding there for 3 days, living in an old mining foreman's house that still had a functioning well and enough structural integrity to provide shelter. Marcus had chosen the location carefully. It was far enough off any major highway to avoid casual discovery, but close enough to a small town for emergency supplies if needed. The children had adapted to their circumstances with a resilience that both amazed and worried Marcus. They'd turned survival into a series of educational games, with Jake's daughter Emma teaching the others everything from water purification to basic electrical repair using components salvaged from abandoned equipment. But it was during their 3rd evening in Silver Creek that Marcus discovered just how extraordinary these children really were. He'd been sitting outside the house, keeping watch while the others slept, when he heard voices coming from inside. Concerned that someone had found them, Marcus crept to the window and peered through a gap in the boards. They'd used to cover the openings. What he saw defied explanation. The 5 children were sitting in a circle on the floor, but they weren't speaking aloud. Instead, they seemed to be communicating through subtle gestures, shared glances, and an almost telepathic understanding that allowed them to coordinate complex tasks without verbal instruction. Jake's daughter was demonstrating something with a piece of old radio equipment, and the others were following her lead with a precision that suggested they were receiving detailed instructions. But Marcus could hear nothing beyond the occasional whisper. When Lily suddenly turned toward the window where Marcus was hiding and smiled directly at him, he realized they'd known he was watching all along. "You can come in, Uncle Marcus," Jake's daughter called softly. "We're not doing anything dangerous." Marcus entered the house, his mind reeling with questions. "How did you know I was there?" "We always know where everyone is," little Emma said. Matter-of-factly, "It's part of how we stay safe. We can feel when people are nearby, even when we can't see them." Emma Rodriguez looked up from where she'd been feeding baby Tommy. "Marcus, there's something we need to tell you about these children. Something that goes beyond just being intellectually gifted." Marcus settled onto an overturned crate, preparing himself for another revelation that would challenge everything he thought he understood about the situation. "The research program that created them," Emma continued, "it wasn't just about producing smart children. According to Jake's files, they were experimenting with enhanced neural connectivity. They were trying to create children whose brains could process information and communicate in ways that normal humans can't." "You're talking about psychic abilities," Marcus said skeptically. "I'm talking about expanded sensory perception, accelerated learning capabilities, and intuitive communication networks," Jake's daughter corrected him. "The researchers called it enhanced cognitive synthesis. We just call it being ourselves." To demonstrate, the twins Alex and Ben began working on opposite sides of a broken mechanical device Marcus had found in the mining equipment. Without speaking or looking at each other, they coordinated their efforts with perfect synchronization, each anticipating the other's movements and adjustments until the device hummed back to life. "How is that possible?" Marcus asked. "We're connected," Lily explained simply. "Not just to each other, but to patterns in the world around us. We can sense things that other people miss: danger, opportunities, the intentions of people we meet." Marcus thought about the chase through Sacramento, how the children had remained calm and coordinated throughout the ordeal. "Is that how you knew we were being herded into a trap?" Jake's daughter nodded. "We could feel the wrongness in their intentions. The people following us weren't just trying to catch us. They were planning to separate us, to study us individually. Together, we're much stronger than we are apart." The implications of what Marcus was learning sent chills down his spine. If these children really possessed enhanced abilities, then the people hunting them weren't just interested in their intellectual potential. They were after something far more valuable and dangerous. "The research facility at Lake Tahoe," Marcus said. "What would they do if they caught you?" Emma Rodriguez pulled out more documents from Jake's research files. According to these reports, they've been developing methods to enhance and control these abilities. They want to create a generation of children who can be programmed to use their gifts for specific purposes. Military applications, Marcus realized. Intelligence gathering, surveillance, maybe even worse, Jake's daughter interrupted. They want to figure out how to transfer these abilities to adults, to create super soldiers who can think and communicate the way we do. The process is dangerous. Most of the test subjects don't survive. Marcus felt sick. "How do you know all this?" "Because some of the other children from the program are already there," Lily said quietly. "We can sense them sometimes when we're all together and concentrating. They're scared and hurt, and they keep calling out for help." The weight of responsibility, Marcus felt, multiplied exponentially. It wasn't just about protecting 5 children. It was about preventing a research program that was torturing others like them. "We have to help them," he said. "We will," Jake's daughter said with calm certainty. "But first, we need to get to the real safe house. The one Daddy set up that nobody else knows about." Marcus looked at her sharply. "There's another safe house?" "Daddy didn't trust anyone completely, not even the people who were supposed to be helping families like ours. So he created a backup plan, a place where we could go if everything else failed." She pulled out a hand-drawn map from her pocket. "It's in British Columbia, but it's not on any official records. He built it himself. Off the grid, with everything we'd need to survive long term." Emma Rodriguez studied the map. "That's 1,000 miles from here, through some of the most remote wilderness in North America. And we'd have to cross the border illegally." "Daddy thought of that too," Jake's daughter said. "There are people who help families cross, but they don't work with the official Underground Railroad. They're completely independent, and they only help children like us." Marcus realized that Jake had been planning for this scenario for years, creating layers of backup plans and escape routes that even Marcus hadn't known about. His brother had died protecting secrets that were now their only hope for survival. "How do we contact these people?" Marcus asked. Jake's daughter walked to the old radio equipment she'd been working on. With a few adjustments, she managed to coax a signal from the ancient device. "Daddy taught me a special frequency and code sequence. If they're monitoring, they'll respond." What followed was a series of coded transmissions that sounded like random static to Marcus, but clearly meant something to his 8-year-old niece. After several attempts, a voice crackled through the speaker. "Little Sparrow, this is a mountain hawk. Are you flying south for the winter?" Jake's daughter smiled for the first time since they'd left Sacramento. "Mountain hawk, this is a little Sparrow. Winter came early, and we're very cold. We have 5 nestlings who need shelter. Understood, little sparrow. Proceed to coordinate Delta 77 by sunset tomorrow. Come alone to the meeting point if there are any adults with you. We'll assume you've been compromised. Marcus felt his heart sink. They won't help if I'm with you? They will, Jake's daughter said confidently. But I have to meet them first, to prove we're legitimate. Daddy said there would be tests, questions only the real children would know how to answer. The next 24 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. Sending an 8-year-old to meet unknown contacts in the wilderness went against every protective instinct he possessed. But Jake's daughter insisted it was the only way. Uncle Marcus, she said as she prepared to leave for the meeting point, you have to trust that Daddy knew what he was doing. These people have been helping children like us for years, but they've stayed hidden because they're very careful about who they trust. Marcus watched her disappear into the forest surrounding Silver Creek, carrying nothing but a small backpack and the radio equipment. The other children seemed remarkably calm about the separation, but Marcus paced the abandoned house like a caged animal until she returned 3 hours later. It's arranged, she announced. They'll take us to the safe house, but we have to be ready to leave everything behind. From now on, we're a different family with a different story. The woman who emerged from the forest behind Jake's daughter looked like she could have been a park ranger or a hiking guide. She was in her 40s, weather-beaten and practical, with the kind of alertness that suggested military or law enforcement background. You must be Marcus, she said, extending her hand. I'm Catherine. Jake spoke about you often in his messages to us. Marcus shook her hand, noting the calluses that suggested she was comfortable with both weapons and tools. How many families have you helped? Enough to know that what's happening to these children is part of something much larger and more dangerous than most people realize, Catherine replied. The research program that created them was shut down officially 3 years ago, but it's continued under different names and funding sources. There are facilities like Lake Tahoe all over the country. She gestured toward the children, who were efficiently packing their few belongings. These 5 represent something the researchers never expected, children who not only survived the genetic modifications, but developed abilities that exceed their wildest projections. They're not just smart, Marcus. They're evolving into something new. Marcus watched Jake's daughter help the twins organize their supplies while simultaneously soothing baby Tommy and coordinating with Lily on their departure preparations. The level of multitasking and group coordination was indeed beyond anything he'd seen in normal children. Where exactly are we going? He asked. Catherine smiled grimly. Somewhere safe enough that these children can grow up to be what they're meant to be, instead of what other people want to make them. She shouldered her pack and checked her compass. But first, we have to survive the journey there. And Marcus, I need you to understand, once we cross that border, there's no coming back to your old life, ever. Marcus looked around the abandoned mining town that had sheltered them for 3 days, then at the 5 remarkable children who had become his responsibility and his purpose. His old life in the mountain cabin seemed like it had belonged to someone else entirely. My old life was just hiding, he said. This feels like finally living. As they began their trek into the wilderness toward the Canadian border, Marcus realized that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. But for the first time since Emma Rodriguez had knocked on his cabin door, he felt like they had a real chance at reaching safety. The mountains ahead were vast and unforgiving, but they also offered something precious, the possibility of freedom. The Cascade Mountains in late February were a frozen hell that tested every survival skill Catherine had taught them over the past week. Marcus's hands were numb despite the military-grade gloves she'd provided, and his breath formed ice crystals in the air as they climbed toward the hidden border crossing that would take them into British Columbia. Behind him, the children moved through the snow with an eerie efficiency that no longer surprised him. They developed their own system of silent communication during the trek, passing information about terrain hazards, weather changes, and potential threats without speaking aloud. Even baby Tommy, strapped to Emma Rodriguez's back in an improvised carrier, seemed to understand the need for absolute quiet. Catherine had led them away from all established trails, following animal paths and creek beds through wilderness so remote that their footprints might not be discovered for years. But the route was punishing, requiring them to traverse steep ridges, frozen streams, and dense forests that grabbed at their clothes and equipment with every step. "How much further?" Marcus whispered during a brief rest stop in the shelter of a rock outcropping. Catherine consulted the GPS device she kept hidden under her jacket. 8 miles to the crossing point. But the hardest part is still ahead. We have to get past a border patrol station without being detected. Jake's daughter looked up from where she'd been sharing body heat with the twins. "There are people coming behind us," she said matter-of-factly. 6 men with tracking equipment. "They're about 2 hours back, but they're moving faster than we are." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "How can you possibly know that?" "We can feel them," Lily explained quietly. "Their intentions are like cold spots in the forest. They want to hurt us, to take us back to the place where the other children are trapped." Catherine's expression darkened as she absorbed this information. Meridian Biosciences must have mobilized everything they have. 6 men means serious resources, probably military contractors with winter warfare training. Emma Rodriguez adjusted baby Tommy's carrier and checked their remaining supplies. "Can we outrun them?" "Not with the children," Catherine admitted. "But there might be another option. Jake's safe house, it's not just a hiding place. According to his specifications, it's a fully equipped research facility where the children can work on developing countermeasures against the people hunting them." Marcus stared at her. "You're talking about turning children into weapons." "I'm talking about giving them the tools to protect themselves and others like them," Catherine corrected. Jake believed these children weren't just accidents of genetic research. They represent the next stage of human evolution. But that evolution is being corrupted by people who want to control it for their own purposes. Jake's daughter stood up, brushing snow from her jacket with movements that seemed too coordinated for an 8-year-old. "Uncle Marcus, we're not going to be normal children, no matter what happens. The question is whether we develop our abilities in freedom or in a laboratory." The philosophical weight of the conversation was interrupted by Alex, one of the twins, who suddenly grabbed his brother Ben's hand. Both boys went rigid, their eyes unfocused, before Ben spoke in a voice that was eerily flat and monotone. "The men following us have split into 2 groups. 3 are continuing on our trail. 3 are moving to intercept us at the border crossing. They have weapons and chemical restraints designed for enhanced subjects." Marcus felt chills that had nothing to do with the mountain cold. "How are they doing that?" "Remote viewing," Emma Rodriguez explained. "The twins can project their consciousness outside their bodies to scout ahead or behind. It's one of the abilities that makes the research program so interesting." Catherine was already adjusting their route based on the twins' intelligence. "If they're trying to box us in, we need to change tactics completely. There's an old logging road about 3 miles east that crosses the border illegally. It's more dangerous because it goes through avalanche country, but it might be our only option." The detour added 4 hours to their journey and forced them to traverse terrain that was genuinely life-threatening. Marcus found himself roped to Jake's daughter as they crossed a section where the trail had been washed out by winter storms, leaving only a narrow ledge with a 100-foot drop to one side. But it was during this most dangerous part of their journey that Marcus witnessed something that changed his understanding of what these children were capable of. A sudden crack echoed through the mountain air, the unmistakable sound of an avalanche beginning high above them. Marcus looked up to see a wall of snow and debris beginning to cascade down the mountainside, directly toward their position on the exposed ledge. Instead of panic, the children responded with instantaneous coordination. Jake's daughter grabbed the twins and pressed them against the rock face, while Lily somehow communicated with Emma Rodriguez to position baby Tommy in the most protected spot. But it was what happened next that defied all logic. The avalanche, which should have swept them off the mountain, simply parted around their position like water flowing around a stone. The snow and debris continued to thunder past them on both sides, but their small section of ledge remained completely untouched. When the roar subsided and the air cleared, Marcus found himself staring at the children in shock. What just happened? Collective force projection, Jake's daughter said calmly, as if she'd just explained how to tie a shoelace. When we work together, we can influence physical matter on a limited scale. Daddy's research suggested it was possible, but we've never tried it with something that big before. Catherine, who had witnessed the entire event, was looking at the children with a mixture of awe and concern. Jake's notes mentioned theoretical capabilities, but I've never seen anything like that. You just redirected tons of snow and ice through pure mental concentration. It's not magic, Lily said seriously. It's just using parts of our brains that most people can't access. But it's very tiring, and we can only do it when we're all together. Emma Rodriguez was pale and shaking, not from cold, but from exhaustion. The bigger the effect, the more energy it requires from all of us. And Marcus, there's something else you need to know. When we use our abilities like that, we become much easier for the research teams to track. It's like lighting a signal fire that can be detected from hundreds of miles away. Marcus realized they just traded immediate safety for long-term exposure. The children had saved their lives, but in doing so, they'd revealed their location to anyone with the right equipment to detect psychic phenomena. How long before they find us? He asked, the twins still connected in their eerie communication. State answered in unison. Helicopters will arrive in 47 minutes. Ground teams in 3 hours and 12 minutes. Catherine was already moving, gathering equipment and checking the route ahead. The border crossing is 2 miles from here. If we push hard, we can make it before the helicopters arrive. But once we're across, we need to reach Jake's safe house immediately. It's the only place with shielding technology that can hide the children's psychic signatures. The final push to the border was a nightmare of exhaustion and adrenaline. Marcus carried both twins when they became too tired to walk, while Catherine took point and Emma Rodriguez managed baby Tommy, with Jake's daughter providing rear guard. The children's enhanced abilities were clearly taking a toll. They moved like sleepwalkers, their usual coordination replaced by the mechanical movements of people operating on pure willpower. The border itself was nothing more than a line of survey markers in the wilderness, but crossing it felt like stepping into another world. On the Canadian side, the forest was deeper, older, and somehow more welcoming. Marcus felt tension he didn't know he'd been carrying begin to release from his shoulders. We made it, he said, setting the twins down on a fallen log so they could rest. No, Jake's daughter said weakly. We made it to Canada. But Uncle Marcus, the people hunting us don't care about international borders. We're not safe until we reach Daddy's sanctuary. Catherine consulted her GPS and pointed toward a valley that stretched between 2 mountain peaks, 20 miles through old-growth forest. There's a cabin system Jake built over several years, connected by underground tunnels and powered by geothermal energy. If we can reach it, the children will have everything they need to develop their abilities safely. As they began the descent into the valley, Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a solitary man hiding from the world in a mountain cabin. Now he was crossing international borders illegally with 5 extraordinary children who represented humanity's evolutionary future. The irony wasn't lost on him that in trying to escape human connection, he'd found the most important relationships of his life. These children needed him, but more than that, They'd given him a purpose that extended far beyond his own survival. "Uncle Marcus," Jake's daughter said as they walked through the towering pines, "when we get to Daddy's sanctuary, there's something important we need to discuss. About the other children who are still trapped in the research facilities." Marcus had been dreading this conversation, but he knew it was inevitable. "You want to go back for them?" "We have to," Lily said simply. "They're our brothers and sisters, even if we've never met them. And now that we know we can work together to do things like redirecting avalanches, we might be strong enough to help them escape." Emma Rodriguez shifted baby Tommy to her other arm and nodded grimly. Jake's files contain detailed blueprints of the Lake Tahoe facility. If the children are right about their enhanced abilities, a rescue mission might actually be possible. Catherine, who had been listening to the conversation, stopped walking and turned to face them all. "Before we start planning any rescue operations, you need to understand what Jake's sanctuary really is. It's not just a safe house, it's a training facility. He designed it to help children like you develop your abilities into something that could challenge the entire research program." Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling around them like the mountain mist. Their journey to safety was ending, but their real mission was just beginning. The 5 children in his care weren't just refugees. They were the advance guard of a revolution that would determine the future of human consciousness itself. The sanctuary lay ahead, hidden in the Canadian wilderness, waiting to transform 5 extraordinary children into something the world had never seen before. And Marcus, the reluctant guardian who had never wanted responsibility for anyone, was about to become the protector of humanity's next evolutionary leap. As they descended deeper into the valley, the sound of helicopters echoed faintly from the American side of the border, but Marcus no longer felt the fear that had driven them for weeks. They were beyond the reach of their pursuers now, moving toward a future that would be determined by the choices they made in the days ahead. The real adventure was just beginning. Jake's sanctuary wasn't what Marcus had expected. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a weathered hunting lodge nestled against a granite cliff face, surrounded by old-growth cedars that had probably been standing when the first European explorers crossed these mountains. But when Jake's daughter pressed her hand against what appeared to be a decorative stone carving beside the front door, the entire facade shifted, revealing technology that belonged in a science fiction movie. "Biometric lock keyed to family DNA," Catherine explained as hidden panels slid back to expose a sophisticated entry system. Jake spent 5 years building this place, using shell companies and off-the-books contractors. According to the records, this land doesn't exist. The interior took Marcus's breath away. What had appeared to be a rustic cabin was actually the entrance to a vast underground complex carved directly into the mountain. LED lighting strips provided warm illumination. As they descended a curved stairway that opened into a central hub with corridors branching off in multiple directions. Living quarters, research laboratories, communications center, medical facility, and workshops. Jake's daughter recited as she led them through the facility. Daddy designed it to be completely self-sufficient. Geothermal power, hydroponic gardens, water filtration from underground springs, and enough supplies to last 20 people for 5 years. Emma Rodriguez stared at the advanced equipment, visible through reinforced glass windows. "Your father built all this for you." "For us," Jake's daughter corrected. "Daddy knew there would be more children like us, and he knew we'd need a place where we could learn to use our abilities without being studied like laboratory animals." Marcus found himself in what appeared to be a control room filled with monitors, computers, and communication equipment that rivaled anything he'd seen in military installations. One wall was covered with detailed maps marked with locations across North America, connected by colored strings that suggested a vast network of information and contacts. "He was tracking the entire program," Catherine said, following Marcus's gaze. "Every research facility, every family affected, every child born from genetic modifications. Jake wasn't just trying to save you kids, he was building a resistance movement. Lily had discovered a library filled with thousands of books, but also strange devices that looked like sophisticated meditation equipment. "These are neural interface trainers," she announced after examining one closely. "They're designed to help us develop specific psychic abilities in controlled environments." The twins, Alex and Ben, had found their way to what appeared to be a gymnasium, but the equipment was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Instead of traditional exercise machines, there were complex obstacle courses that seemed designed to test mental rather than physical coordination. "Telekinetic training systems," Jake's daughter explained when she saw Marcus's confusion. "Daddy believed that our abilities could be developed like any other skill, through practice and proper instruction." As they explored the facility, Marcus began to understand the full scope of what Jake had been planning. This wasn't just a hiding place, it was a school, a research center, and a military command post all rolled into one. His brother had been preparing these children for war. That evening, as they gathered in the main living area for their first real meal in weeks, Jake's daughter activated a wall-mounted display that showed news feeds from around the world. What they saw made Marcus's blood run cold. "Child Prodigy Program announced by major universities," read one headline. "Breakthrough in Educational Enhancement Technology," proclaimed another. But the most disturbing was a government press release. "New initiative to identify and support gifted children nationwide." "They're going public," Emma Rodriguez said grimly. "Instead of hiding the program, they're legitimizing it." Catherine pulled up additional files on the computer system. According to Jake's intelligence network, Meridian Biosciences has convinced the government that enhanced children represent a national security asset. They're planning to identify and recruit every child with unusual abilities. "What about the ones who don't want to be recruited?" Marcus asked. Though he already knew the answer, Jake's daughter had activated another screen that showed satellite imagery of facilities across the country. Mandatory enrollment for children who test above certain thresholds. Parents who refuse cooperation face charges of educational neglect and child endangerment. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. What had started as experimental research had evolved into a systematic effort to control an entire generation of enhanced humans. And from the safety of Jake's sanctuary, the 5 children Marcus protected were among the few who remained free to choose their own destiny. "We can't hide here forever," Lily said quietly. "Even if this place keeps us safe, there are dozens of children already trapped in the program, and more are being recruited every day." The twins were studying the facility. Blueprints Jake had gathered at various research centers. The Lake Tahoe installation has 47 children between the ages of 6 and 16, Alex reported. Most of them were taken from their families within the last year. The integration protocols are designed to suppress their natural abilities, while enhancing specific functions useful to the program. Ben continued, "They're being turned into living computers." Marcus felt sick. "How do you know all this?" "We can sense them," Emma Rodriguez explained. "When we're in a place like this, with proper amplification equipment, our range extends for hundreds of miles. Those children are calling out psychically, begging for help." Jake's daughter walked to a section of the wall that Marcus hadn't noticed before. When she pressed a hidden switch, it revealed a chamber filled with equipment that looked like a combination of medical devices and high-tech weapons. "Daddy left us tools," she announced. "Not just for hiding, but for fighting back. Neural disruptors that can temporarily disable the control implants they use on enhanced children. Psychic amplifiers that can boost our abilities across vast distances. And transportation that can get us anywhere in North America without being detected." Catherine examined the equipment with professional interest. Military-grade stealth technology, modified for psychic enhancement applications. Jake wasn't just planning a rescue mission, he was planning to destroy the entire program. Marcus realized that his role as protector was about to evolve into something far more dangerous. These children weren't content to remain hidden while others like them suffered. They were preparing to wage war against an organization with unlimited resources and government backing. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. Jake's daughter activated a holographic display that showed the Lake Tahoe facility in three-dimensional detail. Simultaneous strikes on 3 major installations. We disable their control systems, extract the captive children, and expose their illegal research to the media. "You're talking about assaulting federal facilities," Marcus pointed out. "Even if we succeed, we'll be fugitives for the rest of our lives." "We're already fugitives," Lily said simply. "The question is whether we're fugitives who tried to help others or fugitives who only saved ourselves." Emma Rodriguez was studying readouts from monitoring equipment that tracked psychic emanations across the continent. "Marcus, the children they're holding aren't just prisoners, they're being used as components in a larger system. Their abilities are being networked together to create a collective intelligence that the program controllers can direct." The implications were terrifying. The research program wasn't just exploiting enhanced children, it was building a psychic weapon of unprecedented power, using their captured minds as processing units. "How long before this system becomes operational?" Marcus asked. The twins consulted. Data streams flowing across multiple monitors. Based on the psychic signatures we're detecting, full integration will be complete in 72 hours. They announced in unison. Catherine was already moving toward the equipment chamber. "Then we have 3 days to plan and execute the most complex rescue operation in history." Jake left detailed assault plans for each facility, but they all depend on having enhanced children to implement them. Marcus watched as the 5 children began working together with frightening efficiency, each taking responsibility for different aspects of the mission planning. Jake's daughter coordinated overall strategy while Lily handled intelligence gathering. The twins focused on technical systems. Emma Rodriguez managed logistics, and even baby Tommy seemed to be contributing something to their collective effort. "You're really going to do this?" Marcus said, not quite believing what he was witnessing. "We have to," Jake's daughter replied without looking up from the tactical displays. "Uncle Marcus, those children in the facilities are our family, even if we've never met them. They're being tortured and brainwashed to create weapons that will be used against innocent people. We're the only ones with the abilities and knowledge to stop it." Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. From that first knock on his cabin door to this moment when 5 extraordinary children were planning to challenge a government conspiracy. His role had evolved from reluctant guardian to willing accomplice in what might be the most important mission of his lifetime. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Catherine smiled grimly. "Jake's plans require an adult with military or law enforcement experience to coordinate the external security aspects of the operation. Someone who can handle conventional weapons and tactics while the children focus on their psychic abilities." Marcus had never been in the military or law enforcement, but he'd spent years in construction, managing complex projects with multiple moving parts and life or death safety considerations. More importantly, he'd spent the last month learning to trust these children's extraordinary capabilities. "When do we start?" he said. Jake's daughter finally looked up from her planning, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that reminded him powerfully of his brother. It was the same stubborn determination that had driven Jake to research this conspiracy in the first place, but tempered with a wisdom that seemed impossible in an 8-year-old. "We start now," she said. "Because somewhere out there, 47 children are waiting for their family to come bring them home." As alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the facility, indicating that something had triggered the perimeter sensors, Marcus realized that their planning time might be shorter than they'd hoped. The sanctuary that had seemed so secure was about to be tested, and the children who had come here seeking safety were about to prove whether they were ready to become the warriors Jake had always believed they could be. The real war for the future of human consciousness was about to begin. And Marcus found himself standing at the center of a conflict that would determine whether enhanced abilities represented humanity's salvation or its destruction. Outside, in the Canadian wilderness, forces were gathering that would test everything Jake had built and everything these remarkable children had learned about their own extraordinary potential. The perimeter alarms weren't triggered by meridian biosciences, as Marcus had feared. Instead, the sanctuary's sensors had detected something far more unexpected. 3 more families with enhanced children, arriving through different mountain passes, all following emergency protocols Jake had embedded in a network that extended far beyond what any of them had imagined. Catherine monitored the approach routes on the facility's surveillance system. 2 families from the Pacific Northwest, 1 from Alberta, all traveling with children who matched the genetic markers from the Colorado research program. Marcus watched the external cameras as exhausted parents emerged from the forest carrying children who looked as extraordinary and haunted as his own group. One family included twin girls who appeared to be communicating telepathically with a younger boy. Another consisted of a single father with a teenage son whose eyes held the same unsettling intelligence Marcus had learned to recognize. The third family was the most surprising. An elderly couple with a girl who looked about 10, but moved with the fluid grace of someone much older. How did they know to come here? Marcus asked. Jake's daughter was already interfacing with the sanctuary's communication systems, her small hands moving across controls with practiced expertise. Daddy created a psychic beacon that only enhanced children can detect. When we activated the facility's full systems yesterday, it sent out a signal that any child with our abilities would feel as a compulsion to seek safety. Emma Rodriguez was coordinating the arrival procedures while simultaneously monitoring baby Tommy, who had begun displaying his own subtle signs of enhanced development. Marcus, these new arrivals change everything. We're not talking about 5 children planning a rescue mission anymore. We're looking at the foundation of something much larger. As the new families were processed through the sanctuary's security systems, Marcus began to understand the true scope of Jake's vision. This wasn't just a safe house or even a resistance cell. It was designed to be the headquarters for an entirely new kind of human community. The teenage boy from the second family introduced himself as David Chen, and within minutes of entering the main complex, he was interfacing with systems that Marcus hadn't even noticed before. Your brother built quantum computing arrays into the mountain bedrock, he announced, his voice carrying the flat affect Marcus had learned to associate with children accessing their enhanced abilities. The processing power here exceeds most government installations. The 10-year-old girl, who gave her name simply as Zara, walked directly to the wall displays showing the research facilities and began identifying details that weren't visible in the satellite imagery. Underground levels here, and here, she said, pointing to locations on the Lake Tahoe blueprint. Escape routes the planners don't know about. And Marcus, there's something else. The children being held aren't just from the original Colorado program. Marcus felt his blood chill. What do you mean? The research expanded globally, Zara continued. There are facilities on 6 continents now, all connected through quantum communication networks. The system they're building isn't just using American children, it's creating a worldwide psychic grid controlled from centralized command centers. Catherine was pulling up files that Jake had encrypted at the highest security levels. According to these records, the project is called Global Cognitive Initiative. The goal is to create a networked intelligence that can monitor and influence human behavior on a planetary scale. The implications were staggering. What Marcus had thought was a conspiracy to exploit gifted children was actually an attempt to fundamentally alter human consciousness itself. The enhanced children weren't just victims. They were intended to be the control nodes for a system that could manipulate the thoughts and behaviors of entire populations. David Chun had accessed deeper levels of the sanctuary's data systems and was projecting holographic displays that showed the true extent of the network. 47 facilities across North America, 31 in Europe, 23 in Asia, and satellite installations on every inhabited continent. Over 2,000 enhanced children currently in the system, with recruitment accelerating exponentially. Emma Rodriguez was pale as she absorbed the information. Jake knew about all of this? Jake's daughter nodded grimly. Daddy spent the last 3 years of his life gathering intelligence on the global operation. He realized that conventional resistance wouldn't work. The only way to stop something this big was to build an alternative network using the same enhanced children they were trying to control. Marcus looked around at the expanded group, now consisting of 11 enhanced children ranging in age from baby Tommy to 16-year-old David. Each of them possessed abilities that defied normal human limitations, and together they represented something unprecedented in human history. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer would change everything. The twin girls from the first family, who had been silently communicating with each other throughout the briefings, suddenly spoke in perfect unison. Simultaneous strikes on every major facility worldwide. Disable the quantum communication networks. Extract all enhanced children. And expose the entire program to global media before the controllers can implement their final phase. Catherine was studying tactical projections that Jake had developed for exactly this scenario. The logistics are incredible. We're talking about coordinating operations across 12 time zones, involving hundreds of enhanced individuals who have never worked together before. That's where the sanctuary's real purpose becomes clear, Jake's daughter explained. She led them to a chamber Marcus hadn't seen before, filled with equipment that looked like a fusion of meditation pods and advanced computer interfaces. Psychic amplification and coordination arrays. Daddy designed them to allow enhanced children to share abilities and consciousness across unlimited distances. Zara was already examining the equipment with professional interest. Neural synchronization chambers. If we link into this system, we can coordinate every enhanced child on the planet, regardless of their physical location. The children trapped in the facilities could become part of the rescue operation instead of just victims waiting to be saved. David Chun was accessing technical specifications that made Marcus's head spin. The quantum entanglement principles are sound. We could create a global consciousness network that overrides the control systems the research program has implemented. Marcus realized they were no longer talking about rescue missions. They were discussing revolution on a scale that could reshape human civilization. How many enhanced children are we talking about worldwide? Approximately 8,000 individuals. With confirmed abilities, the twin girls answered together. But Marcus, the genetic modifications were more widespread than anyone realized. There could be tens of thousands of people with latent enhanced capabilities who haven't been identified yet. Emma Rodriguez was monitoring communication intercepts from research facilities around the world. The timeline is accelerating. Intelligence suggests the Global Cognitive Initiative is planning to go fully operational within 48 hours. If they succeed, every enhanced child worldwide will be locked into their control network permanently. The weight of the moment settled over everyone in the chamber. 11 children, 1 adult, and a handful of refugee families were potentially the only force standing between humanity and a future where human consciousness itself could be controlled by a shadow organization with unlimited resources. What are the odds of success? Marcus asked. Jake's daughter was connecting to the amplification systems, her consciousness expanding to touch the global network of enhanced children. Unknown, she said, her voice taking on the ethereal quality. That indicated she was accessing abilities beyond normal human comprehension. But Marcus, I can feel them Thousands of children calling out for help, for freedom, for the chance to be what they were meant to be instead of what others want to make them. Catherine was finalizing the operational plans Jake had developed over years of preparation. We have advantages they don't expect. The sanctuary's location is completely hidden from their surveillance networks. The enhanced children's abilities are more developed than their research models predicted. And most importantly, we're fighting for freedom while they're fighting for control. David Chun had established secure connections with resistance cells in major cities around the world. There are other scientists who worked on the original programs and became whistleblowers, government officials who discovered the conspiracy and went underground, enhanced adults who escaped before the current operations began. We're not as alone as we thought. The twin girls were interfacing with monitoring systems that tracked enhanced children globally. The psychic distress signals are increasing. Whatever they're doing to the children in the facilities, it's accelerating. We estimate less than 36 hours before permanent psychological damage becomes irreversible. Marcus looked around at the children who had become his family, realizing that their quiet life in the Canadian wilderness was about to end before it had really begun. But as he watched them coordinate planning for the most complex operation in human history, he felt a pride that overshadowed his fear. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Jake's daughter smiled, and for a moment she looked like the 8-year-old child she was supposed to be. "We need you to trust us, Uncle Marcus. And we need you to help us show the world that enhanced abilities aren't something to be feared or controlled. They're gifts that can make humanity better than it's ever been before." As the children began the process of linking their consciousness with enhanced individuals around the globe, Marcus realized he was witnessing the birth of something entirely new. Not just a rescue operation, but the emergence of a new form of human community based on cooperation rather than control, understanding rather than exploitation. The sanctuary systems hummed to life as 11 extraordinary children prepared to challenge a global conspiracy. And Marcus, the man who had once hidden from human connection in a mountain cabin, found himself at the center of humanity's most important transformation. The revolution for the future of human consciousness was about to begin, and it would be led by children who had never learned that changing the world was supposed to be impossible. In chambers around the facility, the enhanced children began to glow with soft light as their abilities synchronized with others across the planet. The real battle was about to start, and the outcome would determine whether humanity's next evolutionary step led to freedom or enslavement. Marcus checked his watch. 34 hours until the Global Cognitive Initiative went operational. 34 hours to save thousands of children and prevent the permanent alteration of human consciousness itself. The clock was ticking, but for the first time since this journey began, Marcus felt like they actually had a chance to win. Global synchronization began at exactly 3:17 a.m. Pacific Time, when Jake's daughter placed her hands on the primary neural interface and her consciousness exploded outward across the planet. Marcus watched through reinforced observation windows as 11 children entered a state that looked like deep meditation, but felt like witnessing the birth of a new form of life. Their bodies remained in the sanctuary's amplification chambers, but their minds reached across oceans and continents to touch every enhanced individual on Earth. The facility's quantum processors hummed with energy that made the mountain itself vibrate, as thousands of psychic connections formed a network, more complex than any artificial intelligence ever created. "Contact established with Tokyo facility," David Chen announced, his voice carrying information from a 16-year-old girl trapped in a research center 8,000 miles away. 43 children confirmed alive, but psychological conditioning is at critical levels. The twin girls were simultaneously coordinating with facilities across Europe. London, Berlin, Geneva, Rome, all connected. The children there have been organized into collective processing units, but they're maintaining individual identity through covert resistance networks. Marcus had never experienced anything like watching the operation unfold. Through the sanctuary's monitoring systems, he could observe the enhanced children's vital signs as they channeled abilities that pushed the boundaries of human potential. Their brain activity showed patterns that resembled complex musical compositions rather than normal neural function. Emma Rodriguez was managing the most dangerous part of this synchronization, establishing contact with the Lake Tahoe facility, where the original Colorado children were being held. "Connection successful, but there's something wrong," she reported, strain evident in her voice. "The control systems there are more advanced than our intelligence indicated. The children are being held in sensory deprivation chambers that suppress their natural abilities." Catherine monitored global communications intercepts as governments and research organizations began detecting the massive psychic phenomena occurring worldwide. Emergency meetings called at the Pentagon, Kremlin, and Beijing. They know something unprecedented is happening, but they can't trace the source to this location. Jake's daughter was coordinating the overall operation while simultaneously maintaining individual connections with resistance cells in major cities. Through her, Marcus could hear reports from enhanced adults who had been hiding for years, scientists who had discovered the conspiracy and gone underground, and government officials who were horrified by what they'd learned about the Global Cognitive Initiative. "Phase 1 complete," she announced. Network established with 7,847 enhanced individuals across 43 countries. Beginning facility infiltration protocols now. What happened next challenged everything Marcus thought he understood about the laws of physics. The enhanced children didn't just communicate with their counterparts in the research facilities. They began sharing abilities across impossible distances. A 10-year-old boy in the Berlin facility suddenly displayed telekinetic powers that actually originated from one of the twins in the sanctuary. A teenage girl trapped in Tokyo gained the ability to interface with electronic systems through David Chun's remote consciousness projection. Simultaneous security bypasses initiated, the twin girls reported as they coordinated breakouts from heavily guarded installations. Internal facility monitoring shows coordinated resistance beginning at all primary locations. Marcus watched real-time satellite feeds as research facilities around the world began experiencing systematic failures. Security systems deactivated mysteriously, communication networks crashed without explanation, and transportation assets simply stopped functioning. But most remarkably, the children imprisoned in these facilities were demonstrating abilities that none of them should have possessed individually. "They're sharing power," Emma Rodriguez explained as she monitored the psychic energy flows through the quantum communication arrays. "The network doesn't just allow communication, it allows every connected child to access the combined abilities of the entire group." Catherine was tracking military responses as governments began mobilizing forces to contain what they perceived as coordinated terrorist attacks on classified installations. Multiple nations are activating emergency protocols. "We have maybe 6 hours before this becomes an international incident with nuclear implications." But the enhanced children had anticipated this response. Through the global network, they began broadcasting irrefutable evidence of the research programs to media outlets, government officials, and human rights organizations simultaneously. Jake's years of intelligence gathering had provided them with documentation that exposed every aspect of the conspiracy in devastating detail. Global media saturation achieved. David Chun announced as news. Networks around the world began receiving files that proved the existence of illegal human experimentation on an unprecedented scale. Evidence packages delivered to 2,847 journalists, 1,293 government officials, and 543 human rights organizations. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, major news networks were breaking stories about secret government programs, international conspiracies, and the systematic exploitation of enhanced children. Social media exploded with leaked documents, testimonials from whistleblowers, and video evidence from inside the research facilities. But the most powerful broadcasts came from the children themselves. Through the global network, enhanced individuals began sharing their experiences directly with the world, creating an unstoppable flood of first-hand testimony that no government or organization could suppress or discredit. This is Sarah Chun, age 14, held at the Lake Tahoe Research Center for 8 months, came one voice through the sanctuary speakers. They've been using our abilities to develop weapons that can control human behavior. The children here aren't students, we're prisoners being turned into components of a machine designed to enslave humanity's consciousness. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he listened to dozens of children describing their experiences in clinical detail, their voices carrying across the psychic network with a clarity that cut through every attempt at official denial or cover-up. Jake's daughter was monitoring governmental responses as the evidence became impossible to ignore. Emergency sessions called in the United Nations, European Parliament, and national legislatures worldwide. Several countries are already announcing investigations into their domestic programs. But the research organizations weren't surrendering without a fight. As the global media exposure intensified, the facilities began implementing emergency protocols designed to sever their connections with the outside world and eliminate evidence of their activities. They're activating termination sequences, Zara announced, her young face grave with adult understanding. Multiple facilities are beginning sterilization procedures that will destroy all research materials, computer records, and she paused, her voice cracking, and eliminate the children who know too much. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. How long do we have? The twin girls were calculating based on data streams flowing through the network. 47 minutes until irreversible sterilization begins at the primary facilities. The children trapped there will be sedated and transferred to black site locations where they'll disappear permanently. Catherine was coordinating with resistance cells worldwide as the operation entered its most critical phase. Enhanced individuals in major cities are mobilizing toward the facility locations, but they won't arrive in time. The only way to prevent the eliminations is through direct psychic intervention. Jake's daughter looked at Marcus through the observation window, and he could see the weight of impossible decisions in her 8-year-old eyes. Uncle Marcus, we can save them, but it requires using our abilities at levels that might permanently change us. Once we take this step, we won't be the same children we were when we started this journey. Marcus realized they were asking his permission to sacrifice their childhood, their normalcy, and possibly their humanity to save thousands of their enhanced brothers and sisters around the world. The decision would affect not just their own futures, but the future of human evolution itself. What exactly are you proposing? He asked, though part of him already understood. David Chun was interfacing with systems that Jake had built, but never intended to be used except in the most desperate circumstances. Complete neural integration with every enhanced individual on the planet. We merge our consciousness temporarily to create a collective intelligence powerful enough to override the termination protocols and extract all the children simultaneously. Emma Rodriguez was monitoring the psychic energy levels as the children prepared for something that had never been attempted in human history. The process is irreversible, Marcus. Even if we survive it, we'll never be separate individuals in the same way again. We'll always be partially connected to the global network of enhanced consciousness. The twin girls added the final piece of information that made the choice clear. But if we don't try, 2,847 enhanced children will be murdered in the next 38 minutes, and the research programs will disappear underground, where they can continue their work without interference. Marcus looked around at the children who had become his family, realizing that they were offering to sacrifice everything they were to save others they had never met. The decision wasn't just about rescue, it was about what kind of species humanity would become. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked. Jake's daughter smiled with a peace that belonged to someone much older and wiser. "Uncle Marcus, we've been connected to each other since the moment we met. This just makes it official. And somewhere out there, thousands of children are waiting for their family to bring them home." Marcus made the hardest decision of his life. Do it. As the enhanced children began the process of merging their consciousness with every enhanced individual on Earth, Marcus realized he was witnessing humanity's next evolutionary leap. Not through genetic manipulation or technological enhancement, but through the voluntary joining of minds that chose cooperation over competition, love over control. The mountain sanctuary filled with light as 11 extraordinary children became something unprecedented in human history, the first nodes of a truly global human consciousness, united not by force, but by choice, not by programming, but by love. The revolution was no longer about saving enhanced children from exploitation. It had become about transforming humanity itself into something worthy of the gifts these remarkable young people represented. And in research facilities around the world, thousands of imprisoned children felt hope for the first time as they realized their family was finally coming to take them home. The collective awakening lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds, during which time the consciousness of 7,847 enhanced individuals across the planet merged into a single, impossibly complex intelligence that rewrote the fundamental rules of human capability. Marcus watched through the observation windows as reality itself seemed to bend around the children in the amplification chambers. Their bodies remained motionless, but the air around them shimmered with energy that made the reinforced glass vibrate with harmonic frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. The mountain's quantum processors overloaded and had to be shut down, but the psychic network continued operating on principles that transcended anything Jake had built into the facility. When the integration was complete, the silence in the sanctuary was absolute. For nearly a full minute, Marcus thought something had gone catastrophically wrong. Then Jake's daughter opened her eyes, and Marcus saw that while her face was the same, the intelligence looking back at him encompassed far more than one 8-year-old. "Girl, status report," Catherine requested, her voice tight with concern for children who might no longer exist as individuals. "All 2,847 children extracted successfully," came the response. But it wasn't just Jake's daughter speaking. It was David Chen, the twin girls Emma Rodriguez, Zara, and thousands of other voices speaking in perfect unison through a single throat. Termination protocols disabled at 47 facilities worldwide. Research data preserved and copied to secure locations. All enhanced individuals are now connected to the permanent global network. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What happened to you?" The collective consciousness that had been Jake's daughter smiled with infinite compassion. "We're still here, Uncle Marcus. All of us. But we're also more than we were. We've become what Daddy always believed we could be, a new form of human. Community based on shared consciousness rather than individual isolation." Catherine was monitoring global news feeds as the world tried to process what had occurred. Governments are in chaos. The evidence releases have triggered investigations in 37 countries. Several research programs have been officially terminated, and arrest warrants have been issued for key personnel. But that's not the most important change. The collective continued through multiple voices around the facility. The network isn't just for enhanced individuals anymore. We've created a template that can eventually include any human who chooses to join. The next phase of evolution isn't about genetic modification, it's about voluntary consciousness expansion. Marcus struggled to understand the implications. "You're talking about changing the entire human species." "We're talking about offering humanity a choice," came the patient response. "Individual consciousness or collective awareness. Competition or cooperation, fear, or love. The enhanced abilities were never the real gift. They were just the catalyst for something much more profound. Through the facility's monitoring systems, Marcus could observe the aftermath of the global operation. Enhanced children who had been prisoners just hours before were now walking out of research facilities as governments scrambled to address the international scandal. But more remarkably, many of the facility staff scientists, guards, even administrators were requesting to be connected to the consciousness network rather than face prosecution for their involvement in the programs. They're joining voluntarily? Marcus asked. Once people experience true psychic connection with others, individual isolation becomes unbearable. Emma Rodriguez's voice explained through the collective. We're not conquering or converting anyone. We're simply offering the experience of what human consciousness could become if we stopped seeing each other as separate entities. The twin girls' voices added context. The research programs failed because they were based on control and exploitation. What we've created succeeds because it's based on consent and mutual benefit. No one can be forced into the network, and anyone can leave if they choose. Catherine was tracking the responses of world leaders as they tried to formulate policies for dealing with a situation that had no precedent in human history. Some countries are declaring national emergencies. Others are requesting diplomatic contact with the collective consciousness. And a few are asking how their citizens can volunteer for integration into the network. Marcus found himself facing a choice he'd never imagined having to make. The children who had become his family were offering him the opportunity to join their expanded consciousness, to experience true connection with thousands of enhanced individuals around the world. But accepting would mean giving up the individual identity he'd spent his entire life developing. What happens to Marcus Holloway if I join the network? He asked. Jake's daughter's individual voice emerged from the collective for a moment. You remain yourself, Uncle Marcus, but you also become part of something larger. You'd still have your memories, your personality, your individual perspective. But you'd also share the experiences and knowledge of everyone else in the network. And if I choose not to join, then you remain our beloved Uncle Marcus, and we'll always be grateful for everything you've done to keep us safe. The collective responded with warmth that felt like a physical embrace. The network doesn't diminish individual relationships. It enhances them by removing the barriers that prevent complete understanding between people. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a man hiding from human connection in a mountain cabin, convinced that isolation was the only way to avoid the pain of loss and disappointment. Now he was being offered the chance to experience the most profound connection possible between conscious beings. Will I still be able to protect you? He asked. The laughter that filled the facility came from thousands of voices across the planet. Warm and affectionate and completely without mockery. Uncle Marcus, we're connected to nearly 8,000 of the most capable individuals on Earth. We have access to resources, knowledge, and abilities that make us probably the safest group of people in human history. But yes, we'll always need someone to remind us what it means to be human when we risk becoming too much more than human. Marcus made his decision not based on logic or fear, but on love for the extraordinary children who had transformed his life. How do we do this? Jake's daughter stepped out of the amplification chamber and took his hand. The moment their skin touched, Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he'd ever imagined possible. He remained Marcus Holloway, but he also became part of a vast intelligence that encompassed the hopes, dreams, fears, and joys of thousands of individuals who had chosen to share their inner lives completely, for a moment that lasted both forever and no time at all. Marcus experienced what it was like to be a frightened child in a research facility, a brilliant scientist discovering the implications of consciousness expansion, a government official struggling with the ethics of human enhancement, and thousands of other perspectives simultaneously. But rather than being overwhelmed, he felt a peace that came from understanding that he was no longer alone in facing the challenges of existence. When the integration was complete, Marcus opened his eyes to find himself still standing in Jake's sanctuary, still recognizably himself, but now carrying within his consciousness the knowledge and support of a global family that extended far beyond the children who had first knocked on his cabin door. "Welcome to the network," Jake's daughter said, and Marcus could feel the greeting echoed by thousands of voices across the planet. Catherine, who had been observing the process, stepped forward. "What happens now?" "The world knows about enhanced children. Governments are in chaos, and there's a global consciousness network that's growing every day. How does humanity move forward from here?" The collective consciousness responded through multiple voices, but Marcus could feel the answer forming in his own mind as well. "We build a new kind of civilization. Not one based on competition for scarce resources, but one based on sharing abundance. Not one divided by artificial barriers of nationality, race, or ideology, but one united by voluntary participation in expanded consciousness. And if people choose not to join, then they continue living as humans always have, with our support and protection. The network exists to serve humanity, not to replace it. Some people will choose individual consciousness, and their choice will be respected and valued." Marcus felt the truth of this commitment resonating through the network. The enhanced children hadn't become conquerors or rulers, they'd become servants of human potential, dedicated to offering choices rather than imposing solutions. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same Canadian valley where their journey toward collective consciousness had begun. But now, instead of a hidden sanctuary, the location hosted a thriving community where individuals from around the world came to learn about consciousness expansion and choose whether to join the network. The children who had once been refugees were now teachers, helping others understand the possibilities and responsibilities that came with enhanced awareness. Baby Tommy, now walking and displaying remarkable abilities for his age, played with dozens of other young children who represented humanity's next generation, some enhanced, some not, all valued equally. Emma Rodriguez had become a coordinator for families affected by the former research programs, helping them heal from trauma while exploring their own potential for consciousness expansion. The twins worked with scientists and engineers to develop technologies that served the collective good rather than individual profit. Lily and Zara taught classes on psychic development and ethical decision-making. And Jake's daughter had become something unprecedented in human history, the primary interface between individual and collective consciousness, helping people navigate the choice between traditional human awareness and participation in the global network. Marcus himself had found a role he'd never expected, guardian not just of enhanced children, but of the values that ensured the network remained a force for liberation rather than control. His individual perspective, shaped by years of both isolation and connection, helped the collective consciousness remember what it meant to respect individual choice and human dignity. The world had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible when Emma Rodriguez first knocked on his cabin door with 4 babies in a snowstorm. But as Marcus watched children of all backgrounds playing together while their parents discussed philosophy, technology, and the future of human consciousness, he realized that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations began with the simplest acts of compassion. Humanity's next evolutionary step hadn't been imposed from above or engineered in a laboratory. It had emerged from the choice to care for vulnerable children, to protect the innocent, and to believe that connection was stronger than isolation. And in a world where consciousness itself could be shared across impossible distances, the most important truth remained unchanged. Love was still the force that made everything else possible. 5 years after the global awakening, Marcus stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly, representing not a nation but something humanity had never seen before. A truly global consciousness that spoke for the collective well-being of the planet itself. The world had changed in ways both subtle and profound since that February night when Emma Rodriguez knocked on his cabin door. The most obvious changes were technological diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were being cured through psychic healing techniques combined with enhanced medical knowledge. Environmental crises were being solved through collective problem-solving that could process millions of variables simultaneously. Wars had become impossible when the consciousness network could facilitate true understanding between opposing groups. But the deeper changes were philosophical. Humanity was learning to think beyond individual survival, beyond tribal competition, beyond the scarcity mindset that had driven most of human history. The enhanced children, now teenagers and young adults, had become bridges between old human consciousness and new collective awareness. Distinguished delegates, Marcus began, his voice carrying not just his own thoughts, but the synthesized wisdom of over 2.3 million individuals who had chosen to join the network across all continents. Today marks the 5th anniversary of humanity's choice to evolve beyond isolation into cooperation. I stand before you not as a representative of the enhanced community, but as a voice for those who chose to expand what it means to be human. In the gallery, he could see familiar faces. Emma Rodriguez, now 28, served as Director of Integration Services, helping newcomers adapt to expanded consciousness. The twins, Alex and Ben, had become renowned architects of systems that served collective rather than individual interests. Lily had founded schools where enhanced and non-enhanced children learned together, developing curricula that honored both individual achievement and group harmony. Jake's daughter, now 13, sat in the front row with baby Tommy, who at 5 years old displayed abilities that surpassed most adults, but retained the playful curiosity that kept the network grounded in wonder rather than cynicism. She had chosen to remain the primary liaison between the collective consciousness and traditional human institutions, using her unique position to ensure that evolution remained voluntary rather than mandatory. The question before us today, Marcus continued, is not whether humanity should join the consciousness network. That choice will always remain individual and voluntary. The question is how we structure global civilization to support both forms of human awareness. The traditional individual consciousness that has served our species for millennia, and the collective consciousness that offers solutions to challenges too complex for any individual mind to solve. The Chinese delegate raised his hand. Mr. Holloway, critics argue that the consciousness network represents a form of mental colonization, that you're creating a species of humans dependent on psychic connection who can't function independently. Marcus felt the network's collective wisdom flow through him as he responded. An excellent concern, Ambassador Chen, but our experience shows the opposite. Individuals who join the network often become more capable independently, not less. They carry within themselves the knowledge and perspectives of millions, making them more effective decision-makers even when working alone. And many choose to disconnect periodically to maintain their individual identity and perspective. Catherine Walsh, now serving as the network's Director of Individual Rights, stood from the audience. If I may add to that response, I've remained intentionally unconnected to the network for 5 years, serving as an advocate for traditional human consciousness. During that time, I've never experienced pressure to join, and my role as a check on collective decision-making has been not only respected but actively sought by the network leadership. The British delegate leaned forward. What about the children born into the network? Do they have genuine choices about their level of consciousness integration? Jake's daughter stood to answer this question herself. Every child, whether born to enhanced or traditional parents, reaches an age where they choose their level of consciousness participation. Some children of network members choose individual awareness. Some children of traditional families choose collective integration. The choice is considered sacred and irreversible once made at age 18. Marcus watched the assembly absorb this information, seeing the careful consideration on faces that represented billions of people worldwide. The consciousness network had proven its value through results rather than rhetoric, ending conflicts, solving environmental crises, advancing medical knowledge, and creating abundance where scarcity had once existed. But the question of coexistence between different forms of human consciousness remained complex. The proposal before you today, Marcus continued, is the establishment of parallel governance systems, traditional democratic institutions for communities that choose individual consciousness-based decision-making, and collective consensus systems for communities that choose network-based governance. Neither system would have authority over the other, and individuals could migrate between systems based on their chosen form of consciousness. The Russian delegate stood. This essentially creates two separate human species. How do we prevent conflict between them? Tommy, despite being only 5 years old, requested permission to address this concern. The assembly granted it, curious to hear from someone who represented the newest generation of enhanced humans. "Respectful delegate," Tommy said, his voice carrying the strange combination of childlike innocence and ancient wisdom that characterized network-connected children. "We don't think of enhanced and traditional humans as separate species. We think of them as different expressions of the same species. Like people who speak different languages can still be friends and work together." The simple analogy resonated through the assembly more powerfully than complex philosophical arguments. The consciousness network wasn't creating a master race, it was creating a new form of human community that could coexist with traditional forms. Emma Rodriguez approached the podium to present the practical details of the coexistence proposal. The network has identified 347 regions worldwide where communities would prefer collective governance systems. These areas would be administered through consensus decision-making involving all connected individuals in each region. Traditional democratic governments would maintain authority over areas that choose individual consciousness-based governance. She activated a holographic display showing the proposed boundaries. Importantly, these aren't ethnic or national divisions. They're based entirely on consciousness choice. Families could live in either system regardless of their genetic background, and movement between systems would be facilitated rather than restricted. The Secretary General stood to address the fundamental question underlying the entire discussion. "Mr. Holloway, in 5 years, the consciousness network has grown to include over 2 million individuals. At what point does this expansion become problematic for those who choose to remain individually conscious?" Marcus felt the weight of the question, understanding that it touched the deepest fears about human evolution and diversity. "Madam Secretary General, the network's growth has actually been slowing rather than accelerating. We believe this indicates we're approaching a natural equilibrium where roughly 30% of humanity chooses collective consciousness and 70% maintains individual awareness. Both forms of consciousness appear to be essential for human thriving." Jake's daughter added crucial context. "The network has discovered that we need individual consciousness to provide creativity, innovation, and unique perspectives that prevent collective thinking from becoming stagnant. Meanwhile, individual consciousness benefits from network problem-solving capabilities for challenges too complex for any one mind to solve. We're not evolving into one form of consciousness. We're evolving into a partnership between two forms." The African Union representative posed the final critical question. What safeguards exist to prevent the consciousness network from using its enhanced capabilities to coerce or manipulate traditional humans? Catherine Walsh returned to the podium to address this concern. "For 5 years, I've served as an independent monitor with access to all network decisions and capabilities. I can report that the ethical programming Jake Holloway built into the original sanctuary systems has become foundational to network consciousness. They literally cannot take actions that harm individual autonomy without causing severe psychic distress to all connected members. Marcus concluded the presentation with a personal reflection. Distinguished delegates, 5 years ago I was a man hiding from human connection in a mountain cabin, convinced that isolation was the only way to avoid disappointment and pain. A woman with 4 babies knocked on my door in a snowstorm and changed not just my life, but the trajectory of human evolution itself. He gestured toward the enhanced individuals in the gallery. These remarkable people didn't gain their abilities to become superior to traditional humans. They gained them to become servants of human potential. Every decision the network makes is guided by the principle that enhanced consciousness exists to protect and serve all forms of human awareness. The vote that followed was closer than expected: 127 nations in favor of the parallel governance proposal, 66 opposed, and 25 abstentions. But it was enough to begin the formal process of restructuring human civilization to accommodate both individual and collective consciousness. As delegates filed out of the assembly hall, Marcus found himself surrounded by the extended family that had grown from 4 frightened children in a snowstorm. Tommy climbed onto his shoulders while Jake's daughter took his hand, and the twins flanked them with Lily and Emma Rodriguez completing their circle. "What happens next, Uncle Marcus?" Tommy asked with 5-year-old directness. Marcus looked around at these extraordinary young people who had shown humanity that evolution could be a choice rather than an accident, that consciousness could expand through love rather than conquest, and that the future could be created rather than simply endured. "Next, we build the world your father dreamed of," he said, feeling Jake's presence in the mountains of Canada where this journey had begun. "A world where every human can choose their own form of consciousness, where enhanced abilities serve rather than dominate, and where children like you can grow up free to become whatever they're meant to be." As they walked out of the United Nations building into a New York afternoon filled with hovering vehicles, powered by collective problem-solving and traditional vehicles driven by individual choice, Marcus realized that the most important transformation hadn't been the development of psychic abilities or collective consciousness. It had been the discovery that love was strong enough to bridge any difference between conscious beings, whether they thought as individuals or as part of a network that spanned the globe. The woman who knocked on his cabin door with 4 babies had been right. He wasn't their daddy, but he had been all they needed to begin humanity's next great adventure. And now, as those children became adults who served as bridges between different forms of human consciousness, Marcus understood that sometimes the most extraordinary stories began with the simplest choice to care for those who needed help. The future stretched ahead, unknown but no longer frightening, because humanity had learned that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together, whether as individuals, as a collective, or as the partnership between both that represented the true evolution of human consciousness. In the end, the greatest gift the enhanced children had given humanity wasn't psychic abilities or collective intelligence. It was the proof that cooperation was possible, that love could overcome fear, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to choose connection over isolation. The story that began with a knock on a cabin door in a snowstorm had become the foundation of humanity's next chapter, written not in laboratories or government facilities, but in the choices made by people who refused to let fear determine what human consciousness could become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.